Frost blanketed the driveway when I arrived and parked. I figured the porch light would be shining, perhaps a wreath hung up, and gentle music floating from the front window. Instead, I was greeted by a house that seemed deserted. There were no lights, no feeling of comfort, just a heavy silence pressed up against the glass. Sitting in my car for a moment, I stared at the unlit windows, wondering for a second if I had mixed up the date. But the calendar was right. December 22nd, the winter solstice, and this was when I should have returned home. I picked up my bag, climbed the steps, and found the extra key right where it always had been, tucked beneath that chipped ceramic frog Harvey Coulter, my father, always joked was too ugly for anyone to take. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, hoping to hear familiar voices or maybe catch a familiar scent. Yet there was nothing, just the low sound of the refrigerator running and the quiet tick of the heater as it tried to start. A dull yellow glow came from the kitchen light, and at the table, bent over his sandwich as though it might come apart if he bit down too quickly, sat my grandfather. He glanced up at me, his gaze weary yet gentle. "You're here," Walter remarked, as though I was behind schedule somehow. "Where is everybody?" I asked, letting my bag drop near the entrance. He gestured in the direction of the refrigerator. "They left you a note." With a growing sense of unease, I went over to look. Affixed to the fridge was a ripped scrap of notebook paper. I recognized my mother's handwriting immediately. Angled, rushed, all in uppercase. "Used your money to invest in stocks. We'll explain later. Watch Grandpa." I stood motionless for a few moments, just staring at it. I read the note over again, and then once more, each time feeling the impact deepen. $7,500 was gone. That sum represented 5 years of my life, working overtime, forgoing weekends, and skipping meals out. Everything had disappeared in an instant because of a single sentence taped to our refrigerator. I lowered myself into the chair across from my grandfather, still clutching the note in my hand, as though it were evidence of wrongdoing. He spoke softly and told me they went to Key West, leaving yesterday morning. I found myself unable to get any words out. He added that he thought perhaps I had sent them something, once he realized the envelope was missing. I gave a small shake of my head. No, I hadn't sent anything. When I opened the refrigerator, all I found was half a loaf of bread, some condiments, and a bottle of tonic water. No milk and no leftovers. Dirty dishes crowded the sink, while an unopened final notice from the power company sat next to the toaster. "Have you eaten anything other than that?" I asked, gesturing at the sandwich. His gaze dropped to the floor. He admitted he hadn't managed to eat much else throughout the week. Though my chest ached, I kept my silence. I didn't shed any tears. At least, not yet. I flung the note onto the counter and faced him. "Okay," I said. "The first thing we're going to do is get you some real food." I told myself that I was determined to uncover the full extent of what was happening. As I took out my phone, I realized something had changed for me. This had grown into something much bigger than just finances. I prepared oatmeal with apples and honey for my grandfather, just the way he used to make it for me when I was a child. He ate at a leisurely pace, but he finished everything and thanked me as if I'd served him an expensive steak supper. After clearing the dishes and starting the dishwasher, I did my best to hide the fact that my hands were trembling. I forced myself not to dwell on the financial situation just yet. Not while he still needed nourishment. Not when the house felt so chilly. But when I sat at the table, powered up my laptop, and accessed my online banking, the reality I'd been avoiding was right in front of me in the form of figures. The most recent transfer was 5 days ago. The funds had been moved into some brokerage account I couldn't identify, but it was listed under my parents' names. There was nothing left in the account. $17,500 gone. I snapped my laptop shut and leaned back in my chair, gazing up at the ceiling as if it might reveal what to do next. Instead, old memories surfaced. My savings journey began when I was 16. My father, Harvey Coulter, had just been laid off from his job at the auto shop, and my mother, Elaine Coulter, barely managed to buy groceries with her part-time hours at the craft store. I filled out an application at Briar Patch Grill, the diner on Spruce, and soon added weekend shifts at the laundromat. While my peers cheered at football games and swayed beneath prom decorations, I was cleaning out lint traps and tallying tip money alone in the break room. This wasn't because of any pressure from others, but because I desperately didn't want us to go under. I clearly recall the afternoon I set up my very first savings account. I gave my mother, Elaine Coulter, the folder with my brand new account number, feeling both worn out and proud after logging my 6th weekend in a row of double shifts. With a smile, she told me, "Banks prey on young people. Just move it into our family's account, and I'll make sure it's secure until you need it." I gave a silent nod, trusting her words. Month after month, I transferred Lydia $600 and later $800. Whenever I picked up extra shifts at Mercyfield Medical Center, I gave up on trips away. The car I drove wheezed each time I made a left turn. My dinners were mainly rice, beans, and self-respect, and whenever doubts crept in, I reminded myself that this is how people slowly, quietly earn their independence by their own choosing. My younger sister Sophie never had to wrestle with thoughts like these. Although my younger sister was 6 years younger than me, it always felt like she experienced another reality within our home. When my 16th birthday arrived, I received a second-hand backpack and a stack of responsibility. At 16, my younger sister was presented with a brand new phone and an ice cream cake elegantly scripted with her name. She never needed to get a job. She never considered what anything cost. She never volunteered to help when I was juggling both the flu season and my final exams. She's more emotionally fragile. My mother, Elaine Coulter, always used to say, "We don't want to burden her." I kept telling myself it didn't make a difference. I was supposed to be the resilient one. Some people, it said, are given more to bear because they're able to handle it. Yet now, as I sat in a house without winter solstice decorations, missing my family and having no money, I questioned whether I had shouldered burdens that weren't really mine. I glanced across the room at my grandfather, dozing in his recliner, and then at the envelope I'd sealed up with our bank statements inside. I reopened my laptop, not to assess the losses, but to begin documenting everything. Each withdrawal, each specific day, every deception weighed on me. If anyone believed they could take everything and still call it love, they were about to discover just how much strength I had left. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of my grandfather coughing in the other room. His breathing was harsh and hollow, as if his lungs were struggling to expel grit. I cocooned myself in a blanket and shuffled down the hall. By the time I arrived, Harvey Coulter was already in the kitchen, bracing himself against the counter as he filled a glass with water. His hands shook so much that the glass nearly slipped from his grip. I took the glass from him softly, guided him to the table, and tried to keep my expression unreadable. "Did you remember your morning medication?" I asked. He gave me a look, as though I'd prompted him to recall something he meant to avoid. "I ran out 2 days ago," he confessed. "I told my younger sister to get them, but she said she was too busy." I swung open the kitchen cabinet where his pill case was usually stored. It was empty. I checked through the drawers next. Still nothing. An unopened refill slip from Well Farm RX sat beneath a pile of supermarket flyers. His full name was written clearly on the label, and the pickup date, 5 days ago, had been encircled with a pink marker. My gut clenched in response. While Walter, my grandfather, drank his water, I wandered from room to room, mentally cataloging what I saw. There was a heap of dirty dishes coated with old food in the sink. Inside the fridge, I spotted 2 expired yogurts, a jar of pickles, and 3 containers of takeout that were past their prime. On the counter, the loaf of bread had started to mold, and the fruit bowl held nothing but a single withered orange. Near the entrance, I discovered a stack of unopened utility bills. One envelope, printed in red and bearing a final notice stamp, stood out. My younger sister had definitely visited recently. Her jacket still hung from the rack, and her cosmetics bag rested on the edge of the bathroom sink. Still, her attention and care were missing. I peered into the guest room, where she sometimes stayed to look after my grandfather. The bed was tidy, but I spotted empty snack wrappers lying on the mattress. There was an empty wine bottle on the floor beside the nightstand. I returned to my seat with my grandfather and reopened my laptop, reviewing half a year's worth of bank transactions. The irregularities were hard to spot at first, amounts just shy of a few $100s, sometimes even less. There were supposed grocery purchases, but nothing ever made it to my kitchen. Transfers labeled as urgent family needs appeared next. The amounts had grown recently, with larger sums withdrawn. One transaction was described as an investment opportunity, and another corresponded to a flight reservation. Much of it seemed unfamiliar to me, but the dates matched up far too precisely to be a coincidence. The withdrawals started small, then increased in frequency, until suddenly everything was taken at once. "I'm sorry, Hazel," my grandfather whispered gently. "I should have told you, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up." I faced him. "You knew they were taking your money." Tears welled up in his eyes. "I didn't at the beginning. Last year, when the kitchen renovation began, they claimed it was a loan. Promised they'd make payments back to me each month. But there was always some justification. Isaac's tuition, Sophie's vehicle, and eventually, I just gave up on questioning it." The heaviness settled beneath my chest, both sharp and familiar in its ache. Their betrayal wasn't limited to just me. They had taken advantage of my grandfather as well. Old trust and gentle hands lingered in my mind. I reached across the kitchen table, taking my grandfather's hand in mine. "Then the questions stop," I said quietly, "and we start looking out for whatever remains." He gave a single slow nod as I opened the manila envelope and spread the first sheet of documents across the kitchen table. I didn't reach out to them, not even after I saw the brokerage transfer or when I discovered Walter's medications at Well Farm RX were overdue by 5 days. Not even when I spotted the overdraft letter hidden beneath a Red Lobster coupon on the counter. There was no use. They were perfectly aware of their actions, and they expected me to simply accept it, to resign myself and clean up after them, the way I always had. I did what I had always done, but this time I created a fresh folder on my computer titled Damage Control. I meticulously recorded every bank receipt, financial transaction, and funds transfer there. I snapped pictures of the refrigerator, the old loaf of bread, and the overdue notices piling up. I digitized my grandfather's Well Farm RX alerts, utility statements, and the prescription bag with the pickup slip still attached that my younger sister had never touched. I saved screenshots of messages from my mother, including lines such as, "We're all in this together, and you're so responsible. It's inspiring," and placed them along with everything else. After collecting it all, I sent an email to my friend Monica Adler. Monica Adler got back to me in under an hour. She had always instinctively known whenever I wasn't doing well. When we were in college, she was the one person who noticed that I'd lost 10 pounds during finals, or that I discreetly missed dinner 3 nights in a row. These days, Monica worked as a corporate lawyer in Eugene, but she never stopped replying to my texts. It felt just like when my younger sister and I were sharing that cramped off-campus place, eating microwaved burritos and picking apart courtroom TV shows. I confided absolutely everything to her. Instead of offering consolation, she got straight to business. I needed to get power of attorney over my grandfather, Walter Brinley, right away. She forwarded the documents to me. I went to the library a few blocks away to print them, then slid them into a plastic sleeve and carried them back home. My grandfather examined each sentence with care. He said nothing. He simply glanced my way, gave one solemn nod, and wrote his name down. "This is something I should have handled last year," he murmured, covering my hand gently with his own. That same day, we had it notarized at Well Farm RX. While I was there, I asked the technician if my grandfather's other prescriptions were available yet. They weren't. The insurance had still not authorized the refill. Someone had apparently tried to pick them up using the wrong ID. I decided not to find out who. That evening, after Walter had gone to bed, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table. I jotted down a list. First, revoke joint access. Second, set up fresh accounts. Third, record every single loss. Fourth, I decided we should stop all contact until we had some bargaining power. As soon as I checked Instagram, I noticed they were tagged in a picture. My mother was wearing a flowered wrap dress and holding a cocktail. My father, Harvey Coulter, appeared with sunglasses and a hotel towel draped around his shoulders. The caption read, "Sunset Cruise with my love," and said they'd earned Spruce Paradise time. The comments were overflowing with heart emojis and envy. People kept saying how sweet they were and how joyful they seemed. I refrained from commenting. I chose not to message anyone. Instead, I took a screenshot and saved it as evidence of a trip bankrolled by money taken from us. By morning, I had already shut down the account that had previously contained my student loan fund. I redirected my grandfather's Social Security deposits into a brand new bank account. I secured the mailbox and put passwords on all our utility and health portals. When the Well Farm RX pharmacist called back, I verified my identity and instructed them to deny access to my grandfather's records to anyone else. I stayed calm, refraining from shouting or sending emotional messages. Instead, I made sure the others would be unable to interfere any further. After I ended the call, I poured myself some water, glanced at the orderly pile of folders on the table, and felt something that had eluded me for days, a sense of control. I realized that when they returned at last, they would not find the same environment they had left behind. 5 days ago, my father's name appeared on my caller ID. I let the call ring through without picking up. He kept trying, his name popping up again and again. On his fourth attempt, I chose to answer. Not out of a desire to talk, but out of curiosity about the level of urgency in his voice. "Hazel," he said, sounding winded. "Thank goodness. We need to have a conversation." I stayed silent in response. I simply waited. I heard a burst of static on the line, then a quick, shaky breath. The stock market had plunged. None of us had anticipated that happening. Listen, things are tangled right now. We just need to get through this week. We're going to make all of it right, I swear." A heavy silence lingered between us. In the distance, I caught the quiet sound of waves breaking, or perhaps a fountain. I pictured my father making the call from a hotel balcony in Key West, still in swim shorts, sunburnt, looking shell-shocked. "We lost nearly everything," my father said. "The investment fund, it's completely gone." My eyes dropped to my grandfather's bank folder sitting on the kitchen table in front of me. I had just finished organizing all the papers into clearly marked sleeves. Medical, housing, legal, savings, each category sealed and secured. "I need to borrow just enough to bring things back in balance," Harvey continued. "We'll pay you back? Absolutely. It's only for a little while." I stayed silent. "Hazel, are you listening?" I rose and headed for the window at the front of the house. A steady rain was falling. The street outside was empty. The street appeared deserted except for the neighbor's garbage bin, which the wind had knocked over. "You were aware that the money didn't belong to you," I said at last. Harvey faltered. "We were making an investment in our collective future, including yours." "It wasn't selfish. We honestly believed it would benefit all of us." "You assumed I wouldn't find out," I pointed out. Another silence hung between us. "Listen, I can't argue right now. I just really need you to send something through, please. I ended the call. That evening, after Walter had gone to bed, I typed up a notice on my computer and sealed it into a manila envelope. Next, I drove to the other side of town and attached the notice to their front entrance. Access denied. Unauthorized transactions recorded. Reimbursement required. See enclosed conditions. Inside, I included copied account records, the legal affidavit granting power of attorney, and a letter describing a repayment schedule with set monthly payments. I stated the annual interest rate and made it clear there was no room for late payments. I was well aware they wouldn't appreciate this. That was exactly my intention. I left before I could find out if the porch camera had recorded me. I wanted to avoid any direct confrontation. My only goal was to document my actions. Since they had reduced this situation to finances, I decided to approach it as a financial matter. Detached, quantifiable, and enforceable. The following day, my mother sent me a text that read, "What is this about? We need to talk." I chose not to respond. My mother and the others had already lost their opportunity for a conversation when they drained my funds, when they denied my grandfather food, when they prioritized investments over family. I spent my day arranging an at-home visit for Walter's new doctor and securing his spot at Maple Crest Lodge, right by where I lived in Eugene. Walter and I had toured Maple Crest Lodge together virtually on my phone, and after a moment of calm, he remarked that it looked peaceful, then folded his hands and gave a single nod. Later that evening, I sat in the living room with him while he reminisced about meeting Grandma at the Briar Patch Grill after her shift at Mercyfield Medical Center. He mentioned that she never once raised her voice, yet she also never yielded. "You make me think of her," he told me, his tone even rougher than usual. I gave him a smile, choosing not to reply. My attention was fixed on what was about to happen, knowing they would return home in 2 days. For the first time, I wasn't dreading what it would mean when they arrived. They actually showed up 2 hours earlier than I had planned. My father's truck was the first vehicle in our driveway, and then my mother's car parked behind him. They had no luggage, no coats, no happy faces, just raw tension rolling off them like a heat wave. Before they could even reach the door, I opened it myself. My mother, Elaine Coulter, rushed past me in silence. Harvey, my father, came next, his jaw clenched tight. "What on earth is this?" he demanded, glaring at the envelope I'd left for them as if it were toxic. Elaine, my mother, threw her hands up while I dropped my purse onto the couch and said, "You embarrassed us. Our neighbors saw everything, and you couldn't even wait until we were home." I had been patient for years. "Don't act so morally superior," my father shot back. He added, "We were only trying to support you. That money wasn't stolen. It was just moved." "I'll get it returned," I was told. I responded, "No, I won't. And regardless, that isn't the real issue." My grandfather, Walter Brinley, shuffled in from the hallway using his cane and didn't speak at first. He simply watched us silently, like a judge, letting the commotion die down. "You're falling for her manipulation," my mother, Elaine Coulter, said to him. My grandfather, Walter Brinley, began with, "She's already taken everything," before she cut him off. Speaking gently but firmly, Walter finished, "She's only making it clearer." The entire room grew quiet. Elaine stared at him as if he hadn't said anything. "We did what we thought was necessary for our family. We had no choice," she said. I told them they had acted irresponsibly, and that their actions had become everyone else's burden. My mother's voice trembled as she spoke, asking how I could be so unfeeling after all that had been done for me. I turned toward my mother, truly seeing her for the first time, and understood she still thought that enabling, manipulating, and draining our finances was her way of showing love. I explained that what I was doing wasn't about getting back at them. It was about being accountable. a lesson they'd never passed on to us. My father tried to interrupt with another argument, but my grandfather stopped him with a gesture. Walter declared that was enough. After that, silence filled the room. We lingered in the living room as though we were outsiders visiting someone else's home. For the first time I could remember, it felt like this was really my place. I glanced at my grandfather and then at the pile of paperwork on the table next to where I sat. Everything was in order, and we were set. My grandfather moved into his new residence 3 weeks later. When we arrived at Maple Crest Lodge, the staff already recognized my grandfather by name. His new space was bright with natural light, and there was a recliner next to the window, with ample room for his crossword puzzles and the picture of my grandmother, which he still kept beside his bed. I stopped in every other day, sometimes bringing groceries, other times simply keeping my grandfather company, listening. He told me he didn't long for the house itself, only for the peaceful moments it offered. Neither of my parents called me. My younger sister never got in touch. I found out that the house was listed for sale 6 weeks later. The description mentioned that the house had good structure but needed renovations, and I couldn't argue with that. I began slowly rebuilding my savings. This time, I made modest deposits into an account that only I could access. Some evenings, I picked up extra shifts at work. On other nights, I sat on the floor of my apartment with papers spread all around, carefully mapping out a life that at last felt like my own. One morning, on my commute, I walked past our former house. A faded sign leaned crooked in the front lawn. All the windows had been cleared out. The porch boards remained split in the same spot where I always used to hear Harvey say he would take care of it. I kept my pace, yet a small grin crossed my face.